Before I go a little bit more into crows, I want to talk about how I came to write this book, because people always ask. And I never intended to write a book about crows. I was writing my first book, Rare Encounters with Ordinary Birds, and I was talking to the editor of that book, Gary Luke, who's a wonderful editor at Sasquatch here in Seattle. And he said, "You need a chapter on crows." And I said, well, I didn't think I did. There was already a chapter on starlings, and they were a super common urban bird, and that was enough of that. And he said, no, you're going to write a chapter on crows. I thought, I was sort of in awe of him, so I thought, well, I'll do what he said. But I had no idea what to say about crows, because for all of the other birds that I treated in essays in that book, I had come up with, the ideas for the chapter because I had seen something interesting or had some thoughts or, had some reason for writing the chapter. But that hadn't happened to me with crows. I had been watching, like many of you, I had been a student of bird life since I was very young, and so I watched crows often. But I didn't feel that I had anything particularly unique or original to say about them. So when I was confronted with the fact that I had to write this chapter, I started talking to all my friends and asking, and just whoever I could, meet on the street and who seemed like they would be willing to talk about crows. And I asked them, what do you think? What do you think about crows? You have any crow thoughts, crow ideas? And what do you think? I have never been so shocked in my life. I mean, think about it. If you ask somebody about, so what do you think about chickadees? Or how about them robins? What kind of a response do you think you're going to get? Just, what is there to say? They're sweet and pretty, and we like having them in our yards. If you ask people about crows, the range and intensity of the response is just stunning. Okay, there are the people that love crows, of course, and they will wax on rhapsodically. Crows, intelligent, beautiful, iridescent, my totem, I dream in crows. Crow love is out there. But just somewhat more common is an absolute hatred of crows. And this, I have to say, that I did not expect to be so extreme and so common. Crows are evil, poopy, a pestilence upon the city. And evil. Now that is a strong word to use in conjunction with a bird, is it not? And I can hardly think of another bird upon which that adjective would be flung. Crows are evil. It wasn't uncommon at all. And for everyone that I spoke to, no matter what end of this spectrum or somewhere in between, sometimes there's a vague uneasiness around crows too. I don't hate them, I don't love them, but they make me feel a little funny. People don't want to bring their children to a park when there are too many crows. Can't really say why. So there's this kind of vague uneasiness. And even among all of these people, there's the idea that crows demand some kind of respect, that they are an intelligent bird that is sitting there knowing things. What they're knowing is another question altogether, but there is that dimension of respect for crows. Again, that is very uncommon for birds in general, and songbirds, the colloquial name for the large passerine order of which crows are a part. That kind of respect and intensity is very, very uncommon. So I thought, gosh, there's really something here. So I went on about writing my book about Darwin. And the same editor said, while I was busy with that, how about a book about crows? And I said, no way. No, I wrote the chapter. But it was one of those things where, when people tell you not to think about elephants, so here I am writing about Darwin, and meanwhile the crow research is piling up just accidentally on my desk, and injured crows are falling on my doorstep. And a friend of mine wrote to me and told my fortune in Tibetan crow augury, which is a means of divination by which you look at the crow's body and which way they're facing and what they're doing and tell what's going to happen in the future. Told my fortune twice, and it came true. And so the book on crows started to become inevitable, even without me wanting it to. However, the book would have been very, very different from the way that it ended up if one other thing in our life hadn't happened. And that is that we moved from a tiny house about the size of this row of people here in West Seattle to a bigger house, about the row of few of rows of these people. So we just lived in one of those little tiny houses and thought we needed a little more space. And so we bought, just a few miles away from where we lived in West Seattle, a 1920s farmhouse. And it's not a farm anymore. It's got, in the 1940s, little houses were built all around it. But it's in the city, right? It's a couple blocks from a major road. It's a 20-minute quick bus ride from downtown, and it is not what I envisioned for my life. I've been a student of the natural world ever since I was very small, and I always thought that I would raise my daughter in a rural area, that we'd have meadows, and there would be woods, and we'd have a cow, and we'd be barefoot, all that. So instead, here we are buying our second house. My daughter's grown up. We're buying our second house in the city. So my husband works for the University of Washington, my technical assistant husband, and he does global AIDS education. So good stuff. And so we feel that by living here, we're supporting that work and we're part of that work. So that's why we stay in the city. And yet there remained this cognitive dissonance for me. And I really became, as we moved into this house, deeply, deeply sad. I was having a period of very deeper than average melancholia, and found myself hanging out in my pajamas and staying in bed and all those things that depressed people do. And one morning, Tom and Claire got up and went on with their day, on to school and work, and I was lying there in bed in my pajamas thinking, how can they leave me like this? I'm a wreck. How can someone leave me alone? But off they went. And I started to hear this incessant cawing outside my study window in the next room. Just on and on it went. And it had that voice that young crows have, when they're begging. So that voice we're kind of hearing now, when they're all grown up, but they're still trying to get the adult crows to feed them. It's this loud, sort of incessant, annoying, yes, annoying call. So that's another crow vocalization that we know. But it was January, so it was too late for that. And I thought, all right, so I rolled over and pulled the covers up higher over my head, and it just kept going on. And I finally thought, all right, maybe it's stuck in the roses, or there's a raccoon, or whatever. So I went out, and sitting on the wire outside my study is one crow. And nothing's going on. I thought, what? It is still cawing. So I tapped at the window, and it looked up at me, and then it just stopped cawing. And in my imagination, and I hesitate to anthropomorphize, but what I thought was the crow was thinking, ha, I got her out of bed. And then it turned to a completely different task. This crow started preening its feathers just madly, as if it were buried in parasites or something. And so I thought, what is going on? So I hopped up on the desk with a sketch pad, and I started making notes and doing some drawings. And in that moment, I kind of forgot about everything else. I thought to myself, okay, what is it that I really want? What do I think I'm missing here? What am I after? And I thought, here I am, a mess in my pajamas. And in this place where I live, I'm as much an introduced race as any Norway rat. And here in front of me is this intelligent, native, wild bird that I could study for my entire life and still not even scratch the surface of what there is to know about it. And so it was in that moment that crows changed for me from being an object of study, just an object of sort of study, natural history study for a book, to being a kind of guide to a way of inhabiting the place that I live with a sense of intimacy with the wild natural world, with the more than human world that surrounds me every day in the place that I live.